Back in early 2020, the Tested team and I flew to New Zealand to visit our friends at Weta Workshop as they embarked on their most ambitious project yet. A sprawling exhibition celebrating the creative genius and the deep problem solving that Weta Workshop and Richard Taylor have made world famous. That exhibition, now called Weta Workshop Unleashed, is open for public display in Auckland, New Zealand, and I cannot wait to see it in person. But until then, let's go back and visit me and the Tested team in early 2020. Guys, walk me through what I'm about to see.
Well, I don't even know if you've ever been in these studios. These are construction studios we've got down the road from the workshop. This is actually Morna's pad. This is she looks after the whole of this department and this whole building. And so we've set up a miniature in here. It's going to be a bigature that we share with our guests when they come and meet the make-believe experience.
It's a miniature so large it needs its own name.
Yeah. Well, that was a Lord of the Rings-ism. We decided that the miniatures had got so insanely big. This is modest comparatively because, of course, Lord of the Rings miniatures would have filled this whole room.
Wow.
But we're still playing to the bigature thing because it's fun. And I went to Johnny and I said, we need a fictitious film world based in a fantasy setting. Have you got anything in mind? And of course, without question, he did. Be within 24 hours, he sent me a treatment.
Oh my
God. And then, of course, we folded in Rebecca and other designers that visualized Johnny's world along with Johnny's own drawings. And that's what's now on the board.
Yeah, I mean, when Richard asked, it would be lovely if you could create an IP for Weta, you try to play that cool, but for me, a dream come true to visualize an idea through this effects company that I love and know. And then the people he says you can work with, they're your mates, but they're also geniuses whose work you'd admired for so long.
Well, so that's the question I have. You came up with a concept and...
I'd been in my head for about 6 years, and I didn't know when I was ever going to get around to doing it. So to be able to put it through the Weta filter, the same filter as Middle-earth and Narnia and everything, was just a thrill.
What's the elevator pitch for the concept you came up with?
Okay, so Sizzle Reel is a young lady scientist figures out time travel in this pod, right? But she realizes, I'm not... who needs this responsibility? I'm going to use it once. How do I do that without affecting the world butterfly effect-wise? If I can see one dinosaur, it's paid for itself, and then I'm destroying it, right?
What else would you do?
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
Her favourites are Triceratops. And so the MacGuffin there is that you need a lot of energy to power a time machine. So she's calculated it based on the theory that the meteorite is what wiped out the dinosaurs.
Right.
That coming through the Earth's atmosphere is going to be enough to power her time capsule back, right? But you've got to go into cryo-freeze to time travel.
Okay.
So she goes back, she comes out of cryo-freeze, she sees a dinosaur, this has been great, and then she goes, right, I've got about 12 minutes. She gets back in the cryo chamber, and then some nosy dinosaurs looking at the time thing, knocks the trajectory slightly, which affects everything, throws the meteorite off course. She's frozen in time, and all the layers of Earth go over her over the next 65 million years, where the meteorite never hit. Mammals didn't evolve, but dinosaurs did.
And the dinosaurs took over the world.
And then later on, when they're excavating, you've now got dinosaur scientists that uncover a human who never existed. So humans are now the dinosaurs as part of that discovery, while dinosaurs are looking at them because they're cognizant.
Oh!
And how could you not love that 24-hour development pitch?
So much fun. Okay, but
Yeah.
then you come back with this idea in 24 hours, and all of a sudden, your other colleagues start elaborating the world that you pointed towards. That must be like fantasy camp to start seeing new things come across.
Oh, well, it was. And I got to focus on characters. And basically, Richard wanted a big scenic castle. And Richard had sculpted this cool landscape that we had to apply a cool castle to, which is great because as designers, we love like kind of having to work limitation,
yeah.
right? And so I came up with these 7 species of dinosaurs that, of course, they don't have the word dinosaur. They're whatever you want. They never.
They're people. Yeah.
And so I chose 7 species, and then I created a castle that functions on 7 departments.
Rebecca, where do you come into the process?
Well, quite early on, I read Johnny's treatment, and I just thought it was hilarious and really quite an interesting design problem because every frame of reference we have for design and architecture is based around the human form, right? Correct. What do humans need in order to facilitate their existence, whatever that existence is? Whereas dinosaurs obviously have very different physiological structure and anatomy and needs, and And right from the get-go, I felt that this was quite an interesting problem to solve. Like, how do I untrain my brain for thinking about what humans need to thinking about what dinosaurs, and not just one type of dinosaur, 7 types of dinosaur. And like it's a different lens to look at everything through.
Yeah.
And that was sort of how I started the process, really, was trying to break my brain.
You're totally right. So that must have given you a totally different perspective too on the problems they were solving.
Yeah, I think it really did. It made me appreciate it a lot more and go, oh, how am I going to think about not only all of the different roles and jobs that they have, but also how the architecture needs to facilitate multiple body shapes. Like, for example, like the council chairs, they all have this nifty little hole for the tails to go through. Like things like that you just kind of have to think about. Door shapes, you know, how do you make sure that the long-necked dinosaurs can enter any kind of aperture the same way as a short, squat dinosaur. So those kinds of, challenges really did start to inform my thinking around the architecture.
And I really wanted Rebecca to think in great contrast between the two worlds as well.
Right.
Because on one side, we've got the ultimate of the greeny culture. And on the other side, we've got the warmongering, we call them the meat hordes. And so these very dramatic tent-like structures to contrast the beautiful artistic qualities of the castle. And of course, this movie isn't a movie we're actually making, we're theorizing the making of it through our exhibition. And what Johnny and Rebecca and Morna and others will elaborate on for our guests is the process of thinking that goes into the development of an idea should a director come to us with a dinosaurs, time travel, war, etc., and how we would develop that.
I'm looking at this big concept painting, and I love the fact that as I'm looking at it, I'm finding little details that make it feel like I'm in a gallery looking at a Renaissance painting with tiny little people dying in the corners and all those excellent details.
The reason there's no characters in the painting is, of course, we're shooting a movie and those characters would be digitally comped. And this is an inspiration piece for Morna to build the miniature from.
I see.
We may do little grayscale characters as 3D prints with little sticks out of the top of their head with their name on them that you may use for composing the shot. But we would, of course, shoot it entirely clean.
The same way that you shot some of the Lord of the Rings shots and then the characters were comped in after that.
Yeah, we'd either pin block them in or they'd be digitally tracked into the world. One of the things we aspired to do early on, and we've had to step that idea aside, but this tunnel, which we've built into the model, children were able to crawl into it and then stand up inside the model. And that's why we were developing all of the interiors, because the children then would be able to look through an acrylic tube at the interiors. That's had to go west a little bit, unfortunately, but as we've elaborated on other things. But
well, can we take a look at the real thing?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, please come on through.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
So this is literally the set they're gonna walk out among.
Yes, yeah. This is the starting point, really. We're about halfway through at the moment, and a lot of elements are still missing. But it gives you a bit of an idea of what you're going to see in the end, and it shows you already quite clearly the contrast between the two worlds. The lush green side here, we have more trees to come, and the meat horde, the destructive dark side on this end. Yeah, with all the destroyed trees.
People are gonna feel like giants when they walk in here.
Yes, that's what we're hoping for. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, these are our dinosaurs. These are actual.
They are indeed.
Yes.
Yeah,
Johnny will explain these guys to you.
When Richard asked me to come up with this, I said on the condition I can do the dinosaur wizard thing I've been dreaming up, and on the condition that Jamie Biswarwick is the sole creator of the creature's anatomy. And if Richard said no, I would have said, can I still do it anyway?
And of course, Jamie, I would never say no, because I would have asked Johnny to use Jamie.
Yeah, who, I mean, like, for my money, he's the best creature designer working in the world. And so what I did, the one thing this whole project in my head came about by me thinking about a dinosaur as a wizard with his beard as feathers. But who better to design the anatomy of those characters than Jamie Biswarck? And I gave him the brief on all of these characters. I gave him a dinosaur, his role, and then I gave him an actor to think of in his head. It didn't need to look like the actor, but it's almost as if the movie had been cast.
Oh.
So with this, I said I want a Parasaurolophus. He is the drunk winemaker, but I want him to be Richard E. Grant, basically from Withnail and I.
There you go.
And so,
Finest
I said,
wines in this restaurant.
exactly. And I wanted to give him that twist of his neck, like, who said that? You know, and so I printed Jamie out a picture of that. And you wouldn't know it if you looked at them, but I think so much character came out. Like with this, I said, I want a Geodosaurus. And when I say the dinosaur's species, it's as a rough point
A
for
jumping off
Jamie
point.
to
Sure.
do what he likes
Okay.
with, you know,
All right.
because these are 65 million years past that. And so it's all late Cretaceous creatures. And I said, give me a Geodosaurus, and I want Julia Louis-Dreyfus, you know, and give me a Pachylocephalosaurus with the late Pete Postlethwaite and stuff like that. And
Is Mark Ruffalo?
yeah,
A little bit.
well, that's actually Jamie.
Oh.
Jamie
Jamie's
manages
just
to
done
put
himself.
himself in all of his sculptures, like a lot of artists do.
Rich tradition, Stuart Freeborn on down, right?
Yeah,
And-
we saw a lot of it with Alan Lee and John Howe and Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
Their faces are in there somewhere.
And we wanted Jamie just to do maquettes rather than get lost in really finished sculptures. So Jamie was set a day, a sculpture,
That's
and
Each of these is a day
a
for
day
him.
of sculpture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it?
yeah, so it's a beautiful little body of work that Johnny inspired through his paintings, and then Jamie took over.
And it was the same kind of, it was the same thing with watching Rebecca design the castle and the world, and me watch these come out from Jamie. Like, I'm supposed to be art directing this thing, but you just choose the right people and let them be geniuses. That's all you got to do. But for me, because of that, because I wasn't designing everything and just came up with this idea and did some bits here and there of character stuff, I went from feeling like an art director to literally feeling like I was visiting this world. Like, you come up with a world and it's like, oh, this is what it looks like. It felt like a trip, you know? Like, I felt like I'm stepping out of that time capsule and this is what happened.
Well, you know, you never know when you're working on a film what's going to make a good film or a bad film. But usually, if it's really good, it's also because you got really involved, and everyone who was working on it got really involved in the process, and it sort of took them over, right?
Yeah.
All right, Mona. So I'm clearly looking at an unfinished space, but I'm noticing that there's textural differences between not just the lush green, but also the rock seems to be totally different textures.
Yes, that's correct. So the way we did this, we carved it in poly, the same way like back in the day we did on Lord of the Rings. Back in the day-
Polystyrene, you mean bead foam?
Exactly,
Okay.
that's correct. And then you treat it with plaster afterwards and give it a paint pass. This also will still receive a different paint pass. And then in contrast to that, you've seen it exactly right. It is this kind of rock
Now, why
form.
is this sculpt so much more realistic looking than this one?
Because this is literally real. Because we took it from the nature, like we went out into the cliff faces around the Miramar Peninsula, and took silicon molds, brushed it onto the cliff faces, peeled it off, created the
then
molds
Sprayed foam into those molds.
into it.
Oh
yes.
my gosh! So this is real rock. It looks like real
That's
rock
pretty
because
much what
it
it is. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
And that gives us a far more detailed and realistic result. And in the end, we're going to have that kind of rock all along the canyon. And hopefully it will feel quite enclosed, especially once we have that giant castle sitting here.
Oh,
on
so we're literally almost walking through
a canyon type
I see.
scenario.
Now I see.
Absolutely.
So the whole castle goes right here.
We'll be here.
I love the multiple narratives going on here because it's not just a narrative of a different kind of world and a different reality with different characters and good and bad, but also it's the narrative of old school film techniques to new school and what you guys have learned over the last 30 years that you've been doing this.
Absolutely, especially because we wanted to add an educational value and actually show people how we're making this, how we did it back in the day, exactly as you say, and even show kids the tools, you know, so at home they feel like, okay, I grab this knife, I grab a piece of poly, and I can make this myself.
So when I look over and I see the raw foam and then the
Mhm.
semi-painted foam and then the finish, is that how you guys are going to leave it?
Yes, that's the idea. So they literally see see step A, B, C, D, E to get to this, and then also explain the process how to get to this.
So the next time their parents buy something that's got a bunch of bead foam in it, they'll see a mountain landscape potentially.
That would be the ideal scenario, absolutely. We would love that.
That's wonderful.
And yeah, just to give you an idea of the size. So once the castle is in here, we're looking at a height that almost goes all the way to the rafters. So it will really be an immense architectural piece that those creatures have built, possibly with hundreds and hundreds of them.
Now in film, you're often building, I mean, I know you build stuff in workshops and transport it, but it's usually you're not transporting it incredibly far. But in this case, you're not just engineering this world, you're also engineering it so you can take it apart and put it together somewhere else.
Absolutely, yes.
That's a whole nother kind of brain melting occupation, isn't it?
It is. There were lots of aspects like this. So this is coming apart in about 12 different pieces. And we have lots of seams running through there that we inserted a strip of foam. So the foam will always ensure that we can tighten it and make it close.
Oh, like an actual open cell foam. So it,
Exactly, to not leave gaps, because otherwise it would take us a lot of time on site to patch it up and disguise those seams. But yeah, definitely a lot of technical challenges also to get all of the compliances with the fire engineers, the structural engineers, and tick all of those boxes and take those beautiful, fantastical ideas of Johnny and Rebecca and Richard into reality. It's a very interesting process.
thank you.
You're welcome.
The lovely thing about some rocks, and we're blessed with the fact that in the city of Wellington, we have a native rock called Greywacke. The name of the rock.
That's an actual name?
Yeah, Greywacke.
I feel like you're putting me on.
Yeah, no, it's
All
an
right.
actual name of a type of rock. And the beauty of that rock is it has no scale. So what I mean by that is I could put my hand on this piece of rock and it feels 1-to-1 scale,
Yeah.
right? Or I could get a climber the height of the head of a match and sit it on this ledge here.
Yeah.
And it would feel in scale to that climber.
Yeah.
And as a miniature building material, that is beyond phenomenal.
Yeah.
That we have access
Yeah.
to that type of rock.
That's crazy.
So we've used this rock for miniatures at 600th scale and miniatures at second scale.
So if you've been molding this rock for all of these years, there must be contours and parts of the topography that are just deeply familiar to you.
And constantly recognizable.
Right, right.
If you were to go back and watch Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
and see the journey through the Argonauts, exactly the same rock. 20 years later, molded off the same thing. So great stuff.
That's freaking awesome.